Okay. Hi. I said, okay. Hi. Welcome. Thanks for being a few minutes early. It's session 2. I'll just riff here for a few minutes. If you're watching a recorded version, feel free to fast forward about 5 minutes because that's when we'll start. I'll open up the Prezi just to make sure everything's working. It should be. I definitely have the song Despacito in my head. I made the mistake of playing it, so it's just going to be like, just so you know, that's going to be like the undercurrent for this entire session for me. Because it's impossible to get that song out of one's head, it turns out. And it's the second most watched video on YouTube as of right now, today. And it's going to take over number 1, I predict, in like a week. Did I talk about this already? I feel like I did. Maybe that was the other course. My courses are all blurring together. Leon, I'm doing awesome. I feel great. I'm excited I've got a ton of content to give you guys today, but it's pretty ordered and pretty organized. So I'm noticing that I'm just like, sometimes I worry that I'm like, it's like too much content, but I don't know. I feel pretty good about the amount. Oh, cool. Lauren, you're welcome. Bohemian Rhapsody. Thank you. You just gave me Bohemian Rhapsody instead. Now I can have that stuck in my head. I appreciate that. The Spanish one, Shabam. I'm bilingual. I grew up in Spain, Ecuador, and Colombia. Entonces, hoy vamos a hablar completamente en español. Lo siento si no hablas español, pero así nos vamos, tú sabes. Is number 1 on YouTube. See you again. Yeah, I think you're right. Imagine if I just started, in Spanish with the session. People would be like, what? Cool. How are you guys doing? Let's give a little shout out. Let's see. Check-in question. What is the check-in question for today? The check-in question for today is, what is your favorite word? That's what I want to know. Check-in question. What's your favorite word? And why? Why, if you have a why? Why, if you know why? Alyssa, I work with my 2 brothers. I'm the oldest. Devin is 9 years younger than me, and Nick is, I guess, 11 years younger than me. Is that right? I think so. Favorite words. What do you guys got? Just curious. The lighting is a little weird. Let me do this. Succinct. Yeah, I like that. Spoofy? I've never heard the word spoofy, Amanda. Is that something that is like a spoof? Okay, Google, lights all the way up.
You got it. Setting 5 lights, brightness 100%.
That's really bright. Gregarious. Homeostasis makes me feel calm. I love that. Lovely. If you just joined us, we're just checking in with our favorite word and why. Moof. It's an insult my friends and I came up with that doesn't really mean anything, but it's fun to say. It is fun to say. Bamboozle, because I'm still bamboozled as to how this word is a thing. Nice. We'll start in 1 minute. I'm like excited to start. Did you guys do your homework? Did you get all your work done? Did you read the YS guide? Did you do the BBs? Maybe you did. Maybe you didn't. Egregious. That's a good one. Eccentric. I like it. Didn't finish reading, but I got a big chunk done. Cool. Pre-antepenultimate. Yeah. It means the 4th from the last. I just love how crazy long and unnecessary it is. Yeah, Harrison. I love that too. Pre before, anti before, pen before, the ultimate last. I didn't have much time, but I read the Why Us guide. Cool, Drev. That's awesome. Okay. Let's get started. I like to, you notice I start like 1 minute after always. All right. I'm glad you're here. Let's get going. Switching to my Prezi. Hey y'all, it's Ethan. How are y'all doing? Would y'all listen to me if College Essay Guy spoke like this? Would that be all right? This is, in fact, How to Write Amazing Supplemental Essays Session 2. And I am your host, Ethan. Sometimes I switch into random accents, Sawyer, aka College Essay Guy. And I went to college. What if you found out I didn't go to college? Would that change your view of this course? What are we doing? We're doing this mapping process. In other words, well, you've seen it. I shared it with you on session 1. Right now, we're at this part, the how-to. This is day 2. And we're going to be getting into the activities list and additional info and the why us. Now, why am I even on a course on supplemental essays dealing with things like the activities list and additional info? Because I want you guys to think of these as essays. What do I mean by that? Well, I think they're just as important because I mentioned this on session 1, but if you've got your main statement, that's who you are. Your activities list is showing what you've done. And there are ways to do that are awesome, and there are ways to do that are less awesome. So I'm going to spend about 20 minutes talking to you about how to up-level your activities list. I'm going to give you 3 exercises. Additional info, that's where all the extra awesome stuff, I keep using that word, I'll stop. All the extra stuff that didn't fit anywhere else goes. And you don't have to put anything there, but you could. I'll spend about 15 minutes on that. And then I'm going to spend like half an hour at least on the why us. I've got 3 awesome example essays. Let me zoom in to what I'm talking about. I've got 3 awesome example essays for the why us that I'll share with you. And they're really important. It may be that I go over. In fact, I'm probably going to go over the hour. So it'll probably be more like an hour 15 session and then like 15 minutes Q&A because this stuff is super important. I was going to put the why us tomorrow, but I wanted to just the way I decided to do it today was just to give you guys the why us guide that you hopefully read for today. So like I said, we'll be up-leveling activities and awards list. Then we'll talk about additional info, things you should and shouldn't include. And then I'll give some tips for the why us and show you some examples, like show you what really awesome examples look like. And I'll tell you why I think they're awesome. Okay, let's jump right in. 5 tips for the activities and awards list. So first, use active verbs. You'll hear me talk about this in a few minutes, but active verbs to explain what you actually did. Why verbs? Because they're active, because they show you doing stuff. And that's what the activities list is about. What have you done? But not just naming the activity, like what your tasks were important. But rather than saying you worked at a clinic doing different things, get specific. Notice the verbs here. Organized patient diagnosis notes, sterilized tools for surgeries, assisted with x-ray analysis, or measured vitals, made health recommendations, prescribed medicine for treatable ailments, provided medical services for a Parkinson's patient. Do you see how when it goes from 2 to 3, it goes from from 1, worked at a clinic doing different things? That's probably like some student whose dad is a doctor and just showed up a couple days. 2 is an assistant, doing some organizing and sterilizing some tools. That's some responsibility. 3 is like a legit intern, like prescribing medicine for treatable ailments. Like, whoa, you're like straight up doctor there. So you can see how explaining what the actual activities will actually help level up and I'll give you more on that in just a few minutes, will help level up the activities list. Second, make sure the verbs aren't repeating, right? Like if you said instructing, helping, and teaching children tennis, come on, how are these different, right? Instead, instructed tennis students in proper technique while imparting lessons in sportsmanship, health, and integrity. Notice how those 3 are different. Sportsmanship, and so yes, they're different, like teaching students technique. That's the tennis focus part. But then there's also some mentoring going on. Lessons in sportsmanship is like how to be a good, athlete, right? Health, that's something totally different, like a whole different responsibility related to nutrition. Cool. And integrity, that's about how to be a good human. Different from, specific tennis technique. So the key here is aim for variety. Can you get 2 or 3 values in your activities, each of them? That's the game. Another way to do this is to emphasize and, in fact, even quantify, which is to say how much, the tangible, measurable impact that you had. So, who did your activity help? How many people? How much money did you raise? Give an amount. So rather than raise money for children in all of Africa, sometimes Africa or like a whole country, it'll be like Ethiopia or Kenya or Ghana. Instead, raise $3,000 to provide 18 uniforms and 6 scholarships for these particular students at this particular school in this particular place. So specificity is nice. 4, if you were just a member or participant, you don't have to list that. You can just say the activity. So instead of saying member, National Honor Society, participant, Cesar Chavez Day of Service. You can just write what the activity was. This wasn't in the guide that you read. And by the way, I'm just giving sort of the highlights of the guide. So if you haven't read the guide yet, go back to it and read through it, because that's going to get you on your way to a first draft. Why? Why would you not want to mention these things? If you've got 6 or 8 activities and all of them say member or participant, it might start to scream, hey, I just showed up at some stuff. So you just, you don't need to draw their attention to that. You can just leave that off and emphasize in the description how involved you were. Don't try to do everything in 150 characters. In other words, some of the stuff that you'll have to say is going to be like, no way you could fit it. And if you aren't writing a supplemental essay on the thing, you can expand on it selectively in the additional info section. So this student, for example, was creator of 3 different tech prototypes. That was his activity. And he says, research brainstormed and created 3 prototypes of a water cleaning boat. Recognized statewide. See additional info for more. Okay, so that little note, see additional info for more, is like a magic trick where you can be like, it's basically you create a footnote. It's not a magic trick. It's like, hey, check out this thing over here. When might you want to do this? When you've got so much to say that you're like, I'm really, like the awesomeness of this is really not coming through. And I said selective, so don't go crazy, but you don't need to expand on all 8 of your, or 10 of your activities on this. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. What's the difference between a really good activities list and an amazing one? So here are 2 activities lists. Here's an example of 3 activities and 2 awards from a really good list. So peer tutor for AP Bio teacher. Cool. Selected by AP Bio teacher. Now that's cool. If you were selected for something, that's worth mentioning. You might even say selected among, 40 students to be the only TA, selected as only TA of 40 students to be, this. To assist peers with difficult biology concepts, notice the verbs. Provided feedback with student-free response questions. Cool. Member of the JV swim team. Participate in practices and meets, assist in recruiting new members, help raise funds for travel, swim anchor on 4x100 relay. Cool. Now, again, member, could she cut that? Maybe. Participate in practices and meets. Okay. But then look, other responsibilities, assisting in recruiting, raising funds. And it's more than just what I did in the pool. Mentoring for Girl Scouts Troop 4321. Mentored 10 young girls in arts and crafts. Spearheaded troop exhibit representing Italy at cultural community fairs. So maybe there was some responsibility, some leadership there. And brainstorm troop activities. So she's suggesting creativity there. So some nice variety. AP Scholar Award. This is a pretty common award that students like to put. Granted to students who receive an average score of at least 3.25 on their AP exams and scores of 3 or higher on 4 or more. Or superior at Miami-Dade Jazz Festival. Receive full marks from the judges based on style and interpretation, note accuracy, and creativity. These are all really good. All of these are great examples of stuff that you can put on your activities list. Now, what is the difference between a really good list and an amazing list? Here are 3 activities and 2 awards from an amazing activities list. Inventor, Drone X2. Patent number US 8382029B2 was granted to me, the inventor and applicant, after a year designing and testing prototypes. See additional info. Or professional wildlife photographer. Worked with an international award-winning filmmaker, designed and sold calendar to raise funds for nearby school, developed prototype for improved lens. Or lead programmer, AlphaBots. Designed and programmed original video game, these are all real, by the way, to be published this fall. Quickly learned new programming languages, and he names them, demoed the game at Comic-Con. Yes, this was real. Awards. Soloed at Carnegie Hall as winner of the American Protege International Music Competition and top 10 nationally and 2-time New York champion in policy debate, academic All-American. These are particularly amazing because it's the same student, okay? So, why am I sharing this with you? Because the difference between these, if you haven't seen it yet, is a very good activities list includes very good achievements told in a well-crafted way, which is probably you. Probably most students are doing very good achievements, and my goal to help you is to tell them in a well-crafted way. But an amazing activities and awards list includes extraordinary achievements, like some of the ones I just mentioned, having a patent, designing a video game that you premiere at Comic-Con, inventing something, or being a professional, told in a well-crafted way. My point is this: if you participate in activities that maybe are extraordinary, then you could have an amazing activities list. Otherwise, your activities list is going to cap out at really good. That's not, don't be disheartened by that. Just know that there will be some, don't sort of put the pressure on yourself of, like, oh, but it's not amazing. It is what it is. You've got what you have to work with. What we're focused on here is how do we take that and make it as clear and as varied and as vibrant as possible. But here's some good news, especially if you're struggling what to put in your activities list. Here's a list of activities you may not have considered including, but that actually count. And this is in your course guide, but let me just share this list with you really quick. Take a look at the list on your screen. Job shadowing, building your own projects. MOOCs, if you took a massive open online course, that's worth listing as an activity. Now, there might be a place, if you're applying to the University of California, for example, to list that, but if there's not, that's something to put in your additional info or your activities list. Either one is fine. Composing EDM, right? Beekeeping, glass blowing. I've got a student this year who's getting his EMT certification. Here's some more. These are in your course guide. But I just want to get you thinking creatively, especially if you've got just one activity, for example, on your list. Chances are you've done some more stuff. A book club. So one student had a book club outside of school. Another designs her own cosplay costumes. Okay. So these things can count. Now you've got to justify them, meaning write a description that explains what you've learned, what you've developed, the skills that they've brought forth in you, as it were. And there's a way to do that, and that's what we're getting into today. Beware of stretching the truth on your activities list. What do I mean? I worked with a student last year, and it was brought to my attention. Her counselor contacted me because he knew that we were working together, and he said, "Hey, I heard from a college that some of the items on her activities list have been falsified." I said, "What?" And he recounted like 5 different elements in the application that weren't true. Now, I didn't know this. I was taking the student at her word when she was explaining these things to me. And we were writing all these awesome essays. And she's such an amazing student with so many gifts and talents. And she was applying to Yale and, all these highly selective schools. And she ended up getting accepted into some of those highly selective schools. And when they found out that she had stretched the truth, we'll say, then all the applications were, as far as I know, were rescinded, meaning the yes turned into a no, turned into a rejection. And the student was put in kind of an embarrassing situation, had to issue an apology letter. The relationship was strained with certain people in the school. And anyway, it was a big mess. So what did the student do? Said that she was an officer that she wasn't, padded some of the hours, made up more hours than were actually true. And the reason that the student got caught was that it didn't match what was in the counselor's recommendation letter. So, and you should also know that the UC's, University of California schools, audit applications. So they'll, on a certain number of applications, they'll check to make sure that the stuff on there is correct. So please don't do this. Please be honest in your activities list. It's not something that I have emphasized in the past, but once this happened, I was sort of like, okay, I need to make sure the students know this. You might know this and be like, of course, but I just wanted to spend 3 minutes and say, it can, bad things can happen. And beyond not getting accepted into those schools, it was just a kind of a mess, like in terms of damaging relationships and stuff. So don't do it. Okay. Here's a 3-step process for up-leveling your activities list. So if you've been asleep until now, this is the most important part of the webinar so far, or this session 2. Here are 3 things you can do to up-level your activities list. Ready? Number 1, BBs. I know I've mentioned it already, but if you just take that exercise and you apply activities that you're like struggling to figure out what you did in them and just run them through the BBs exercise, you don't have to do long, 5 minutes each one. Spend 5 minutes with each activity. It might take you 40 minutes. You'll have tons to say about in the descriptions. Just answer these 4 questions. Well, 5 questions, right? So that's the first thing. I highly recommend it. Next, use better verbs in your descriptions. What do I mean? And why do verbs matter? Let's just look at some examples. So look at the difference between these. Tutored students in English to help them with their writing, okay, versus created exercises to teach fundamental reading and writing skills. Designed core curriculum based on my progress assessments. Engaged students with humor. Interesting, right? This is the same activity, but look at the before and after. Before, tutored students in English to help them with their writing. Okay, so you taught some stuff, but it's kind of vague. Created exercise to teach fundamental reading and writing skills. So that's the writing part. Then there's the designing the curriculum, which requires a different skill set. Based on my progress assessments, working that in, that was another thing that she did. and then engage students with humor. So not just, and this comes from, the next exercise that I'm about to show you, but looking in how can you express a variety of things that you've done. So here's a resource, because you're probably wondering, well, wouldn't it be awesome if I just gave you this mega awesome epic list of verbs for your activities list? You're welcome. Type in this URL, or I'll type it in the chat box right now. Check this out. This is something that I've been meaning to do for a long time, because I had a sense that it would be useful for my students. Click this for 1 second. This is I call this the epic verbs list. And if you're not seeing it or unable to click the link for some reason, let me just switch my. It's such a gift. So I basically I went through a bunch of those. They have these online, resume, verbs. And I just Googled resume verbs and looked at 5 different resources. And I picked the ones that I felt were most applicable. You're welcome, Yin and Elisha. I basically looked at what verbs would be most useful for the activities list, because I don't think this exists other than right here. But be careful you don't go overboard with this. And so I've listed a list of what I call corporate verbs, which sound like, a corporate resume, we allocated funds, blah, 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 or we apprised or arbitrated, dispatched or, familiarized. So these kind of sound to me like those, I don't know, like a resume that an adult has written. And it might sort of signal, hey, you really got some help. Maybe a professional resume writer did this. But I would just encourage you to definitely upgrade your verbs. And so here a lot, if you use the word critiqued, that's better than gave comments to, and it's shorter, right? Examined is nicer than studied. Studied is fine, but examined is oh, okay, analyzed, So essentially, this is my second bit of advice: is upgrading your verbs. And it's, the other value of this is not only is it going to sound better, it's going to give you more ideas about stuff you did. So let's say you worked with people. Well, did you mediate? Did you moderate? Did you negotiate, persuade, promote, discuss, document, draft, edit, and list? All these things are different things and require different skills and qualities. So enjoy. You've got it now. Okay, switching back to my Prezi. The values scan. Okay, this is worth half an hour of your time tonight. Take a look at your activities list and ask yourself these 3 questions. Which values are clearly being revealed in my description? Which values are kind of being revealed, but could maybe come through more clearly? And which values could be there, but aren't there at all yet? Let me give you an example. Let's analyze this one. Responsible for taking minutes, updating calendar and active member list, communicating with advisors, acting as liaison to our local chapter. Now, that one's pretty good. Okay, so this is not a bad example, but is there a way that we could include, is there any redundancy? In other words, are there is there a detail in here that's maybe kind of repeating the value that another detail is repeating? So let's analyze what values do we see already? So responsible for taking minutes. Okay, cool. Responsibility, needing to listen in order to take minutes, an ability to listen. Updating the calendar and active member list. Okay, so that takes some organization, but that's kind of like an admin task. And when I think about responsible for taking minutes, the qualities in that one to me are covering whatever qualities we've got in, updating the calendar and active member list. So for example, Leon mentions organized. I think both of those activities or both of those details are showing organized. So maybe we could cut the second one and put something else there. What's something else that we could potentially show? Well, it could be, for example, that this student scans her whole application, and we'll talk about this on day 6, on session 6. But we said that maybe leadership isn't really coming through clearly. So we go, okay, well, what are some opportunities for leadership? And she goes, well, with the stuff that I was doing in my activities list, I've got lots of leadership. And I was like, well, that's not coming through yet. Let's look at this example, for example. Did you have leadership here? And she says, yeah. And I say, how? And she goes, oh, I see it's not really coming through. Okay, well, how could she show leadership? Well, you could flip over to that activities list, verbs. So you can kind of do both of these, right? So management or leadership skills. Okay, did you consolidate, coordinate, develop, direct, establish anything? restore, generate, improve, increase, motivate. These are all potential, leadership related verbs. Not the only ones, of course, but this could help you think, okay, how can I include this quality? Because we could look at this thing and go, okay, well, kind of, I get that she's a leader. She's communicating with the advisors and then she's acting as liaison. But wait a minute, that's kind of the same thing, right? Communicating with advisors and acting as liaison, you're still kind of going as a go-between, which shows that you've got good communication skills and you're good with people. But could there be another quality that could come through? Like, I don't know, did you handle any, and again, I'm going to go to the activities list or that verbs list and go, okay, one of the ones that shows acting as liaison to our local chapter, and then she includes one more detail. Okay, so by including these, and I'm not giving you a final description because this was her final draft, but as I looked through it, I was like, oh, in retrospect, and it's okay, this student got into a great school and she's happy. So this is not like a be all end all difference maker, but I just wanted to get a little nitty gritty and analyze one of these examples so you can start to get a little more critical of your own examples, your own descriptions, and go, okay, well, what am I revealing? What am I kind of revealing? And what am I not revealing at all? So what opportunities might you have to reveal more values? That's the question. Here's the game is can you include 2 to 3 values per activity? And I want to change the word goal there to game because I don't want you to think of this as like you have to do this, okay? It could be that your description is just clearly showing one value really well, and that's fine, okay? So I would say this is worth like 30 minutes of your time. So I don't want you to think of this as something that you need to spend like 3 hours on. I think a good activities list should take you somewhere between an hour and 2 hours. But I wouldn't spend 6 hours on it. Okay. I'd spend more than 20 minutes though, because I think you need to really think through what your different activities were. All right, moving right along. So sometimes students ask, should I just list those things that what if I don't have much to say? Should I list like just a few strong activities, or should I basically list everything that I've ever done? So do the less more approach or the more is more? And there are 2 ways of thinking about this. And I want to equip you guys with the information or, so to make an educated choice. I'm not going to tell you which one to do. Okay. So just heads up on that. So the less is more approach is, what is the value of that? You respect the reader's time. You focus on the best stuff. The potential downside of that is that you might leave off some stuff that, and you might feel like you left some stuff, left some money on the table, as it were. Think of the college application process and the college application as being additive, meaning everything that you put on there is a potential plus. You're scoring points with each, especially the values, I think. And each of these activities is a chance to have a couple more pluses. The more is more approach, the possibility of that allows you to include everything that you've done. And maybe you've got one of those applications that's just bursting at the seams. So all the activities and all the awards. But the con might be that, these activities aren't things that meant a whole lot to you. So you might decide, I don't want to put all of them. My advice would be to brainstorm everything first. And then you decide, do you want to only choose the best ones, or do you want to choose, put everything down? And I'll tip my hand a little bit about what I think you should do. I think I would push a little bit more towards the more is more side than the less is more. So if you spent some time doing it and you learned some stuff from it, I feel like that could be a really good thing to show. My sense is that I wouldn't want you to feel like you didn't put all of yourself on there. So I would brainstorm at least, and lean towards putting a little bit more. Having said that, don't feel obliged that you have to fill in all the blanks. Okay. And I mentioned this already, but the average activities list has 5. So just know that. Okay. Now, I know that everywhere else in the course, I'm giving like really strong recommendations. And here I'm kind of letting you decide with a little, like a sense of which way I'm kind of leaning. If your activity is so huge that there's just no way to fit it in 150 characters, I think that's a great opportunity to use the additional info section. So speaking of the additional info section, here are some things you might include. And I want to say might and emphasize that because you do not have to include anything here. So the reason I'm talking about it is because students are like, what do I put here? And so I want to give you some examples. As I mentioned, if you spend a ton of time doing a particular thing and you just feel like you can't fit all of that magic in 150 characters, you might expand. So like the prototype guy I mentioned, he said, here are additional details for my tech prototypes. So for one, the wave machine. Prototype that creates transverse waves of high magnitude in the water. Oh, some geeky language. Okay. So that gives me some sense of what the thing actually was. That's kind of cool. First use, these waves can be used in the generation of electricity. Wow. Okay, this is going to have an opportunity to impact real people, like our everyday life. And the second use is the deflection of waves created by the machine can be used in detection of tsunamis. Oh, wow. That's really important. Okay, that gives me a little more information about what the wave machine does. And he mentions that he got this, at this Science Expo, second runner-up award, which was an activity or an award that didn't fit in his awards list, or he could have put it there, but it would have been out of context. So he decided to put a different award there. And again, this was a student who just had a bunch of awards. And so he listed his 5 other ones there, and he put this one next to the thing in the additional info because, he wanted it to be in context. So another one, a water cleaning boat that incorporates a vacuum pump to collect waste, infrared sensor to detect obstructions, crusher to disintegrate the waste collected in the wheels to make the boat amphibious. Do we need all those details? Maybe not, but it's not a bad idea to include them. And then he collaborates with this company to create an app. That is some next level additional info stuff because it's like, oh, and you created an app with this company and the app's going to be released in February on the App Store. Definitely include that. If he hadn't included that, I wouldn't know that. I couldn't guess that, right? So I guess the thing is this, like certain things that could be implied, you can leave those off, but there's no way to imply this. Okay. That's stuff for the additional info section. And some awards he won. Note how factual these are. He's just keeping it real succinct. It's truly additional information, keyword information. Okay. Health stuff. Look how simple you can say this. Note on dropping volleyball. I decided not to continue volleyball senior year due to chronic back problems. That's it. So if you guys see my application and you notice that volleyball is no longer there, that's why. So any red flags, stuff that you feel like they might wonder about, you can explain it. And again, if you can't, I said this in session 1, but if you can't figure out how to work something into your main statement and you're like stressing, like for example, a bad grade or something, and you're worried about how to work that into your essay, don't worry, you can put it here. Notice how simple it is. If you do have something that impacted your academics, you can explain it. And this student it happened to not impact her academics. She was able to go back to school and be okay. If you are in the IB program and you've got an extended essay that you're working on, I think it can be a nice idea to go ahead and, do a little abstract of it saying, so here the student says, I wrote a 4,000 word thesis and calculated the negative externalities of land reclamation, the act of creating new land in the ocean in Bahrain on native fishermen. And so he explains a little bit about that. I don't need to read the whole thing to you, but basically why do this? Well, there are a couple of reasons. One is I think that there aren't many students who do really high level research and that write 15-page papers, so this really gives a sense of like, okay, some next level thinking potentially. And a counselor once said this to me and I really loved it, is that it gives a window into your academic soul in a way that you might not have an opportunity to on your main essay. So maybe your main essay is on frogs or I don't know, this pair of glasses that you found once, and that's the jumping off point. They might not get about this thing on, fishermen and how it's affecting tourism in Bahrain. So if that's interesting to you and you've spent a lot of time thinking about it, it can give a little extra, something there in the additional info. Again, keep it short, 75 to 100 words. This is about how long it should be. Beyond that, it starts to feel a little bit like, okay, we get it, If there are potential red flags, in other words, say you dropped a sport, couldn't participate in extracurriculars, address these. Address these in a short, factual way. And I think it's so important. And let me show you in Adrian's application, some items that he included that I think made a difference. So in 11th grade, he just marks at 11, could not finish wrestling season. Why? Mom and older brother were in a car accident. Responsibilities at home stacked up, and I was also working at the time to pay bills, so I was unable to stay for practice. Straightforward. Doesn't complain, doesn't excuse it, just here's why. Summer courses. Tried to take college course during the summer, but I couldn't afford the classes, and there was an issue regarding my residency. So not something he had to put, but maybe the reader, as he's applying to these highly selective schools, wonder, well, why didn't he take extra classes? Well, he tried, but he wasn't able to. And when he told me about that, I was like, that's worth mentioning. And I asked him why, and he's like, this was one of the things he said that I mentioned in my main statement is that I was afraid, honestly. He says there was an issue regarding my residency. He was afraid his mom was especially afraid to send them out, he and his siblings. Calculus BC explanation. After taking Calc AB in my junior year, I wanted to take Calc BC my senior year. Unfortunately, my teacher felt he wouldn't be able to teach the class since he lacked the knowledge and training to teach it. Instead, I took up a second science, AP Physics 2. Okay, so that's cool. One, so this happened. Darn, that sucks. But then he did something about it. I took up a second science, AP Physics 2, during my senior year. I'm one of the first students to take this course at my school. That's something we wouldn't otherwise know. This is what the additional information section is for. Maybe that would be in his counselor letter, but as I mentioned on session 1, he wasn't sure if his counselor was even writing a letter. His counselor has a huge caseload. There were, hundreds and hundreds of students. And in this case, it was maybe not going to happen. So let's see. Highest SAT score in my math class. Scored a 1910 on the old SAT, which was the highest overall score in my grade. Now, if you saw the 1910, you might be like, well, okay, that's good. It's not like a perfect SAT score by any means. It's good, but it's the highest score in his class. That's important. Again, something they would not have known otherwise. That's not something that most colleges, especially just, when they're skimming through in 5 minutes, are going to be able to know in most cases, maybe all cases. So putting that in there is important. This is all, and he also listed this on his awards because this was truly an achievement. AP Physics. He was the first student at his school to ever pass the AP Physics 1 exam, scored a 3. Now, y'all, that's important, and it contextualizes that 3. If you see that 3 by itself, you think, well, it's not a 4 or 5, right? If we're talking highly selective schools. But he's the first student at his school to ever pass it. So it's achievement in the context of his application and in the context of his environment. So one of the things, this is an important question. One of the things to communicate to colleges is that what they want to know is, how did you excel given your circumstances and your environment? Did you have unlimited opportunities available to you, or were your opportunities in some ways limited, as they were in this case? That provides extremely important context for the application. How important is this? Well, he had a 3.6, okay, and he had a 1910, and his dream school was Stanford. And, I'm all about, okay, go for it, reach for the sky. But honestly, I was like, it's Stanford, guys, he got in, and I was shocked, and he was shocked, because Stanford doesn't accept anybody. Now, not anybody, but it's so rare to get into Stanford. And of course, it sent me back through his application going like, what? Like, what was this? What happened? Because when you look at Stanford's 5%, when you think about all the legacy students, meaning parents went there, which is also not a guarantee. I had a student who was, double legacy get rejected. One of the most incredible students I've ever worked with got rejected 3 years ago. And I was like, what was it? And I was looking through and I was like, you know what? I think this additional info stuff really helped, because without that, I don't think they would have known all this. So I definitely cried when I found out. So one more thing, additional awards. If you've got a bunch of stuff, I had a student I worked with last year with marching band who just had ridiculous number of awards. I think we even had to not list all of them because she had like 35 awards. And so we were like, well, let's list 10 of them. So, we get it. Once we get to 10, we get it. There are other important uses for the additional info section, and make sure that if you haven't read through the guide that you do. Okay. So what should you not put there? This is not in the guide, so pay close attention. I don't think you should put a second personal statement, meaning a second 650-word essay. Because I don't know, I kind of feel like it's cheating. They didn't really ask for that. They're like, give us one statement. Now, certain schools, which we'll get into a little bit tomorrow, will ask you for a second really long essay, like Harvard and Princeton. And in that case, that's a supplement. That's a different thing. I'm talking about, you can't decide whether to do X or Y for your main statement, so you just send them the other one. I've heard reps say this. They're like, I don't even read it. Some of them say, so are you going to make them mad? No. And there are exceptions to this. Like, I was talking to a counselor on the counselor version of the course where she had a situation with her dad where she wasn't able to take the SAT because he went through a near-death experience, and she wrote about it. And the counselor said it was beautiful, and it brought her to tears. So that would be an exception, but I can't think of many exceptions where you would want to put a whole essay. Having said this, some counselors disagree with me. Some counselors insist on their students putting a second essay, like counselors at very reputable private schools, So I'm not alone in feeling this way, but there's also a contrary opinion. People go against this sometimes. So I just want you to know why I think that it's not, why I wouldn't encourage it. I don't want to annoy the reader. Don't say something like, I got a B plus in chemistry because if you've got all A's, because I think that might show that you're overly obsessed with academics. It just feels a little bit like, okay, yeah, we get it. And I think there are better ways to spend your time and their time. And don't make excuses. So if there's no good explanation for like the bad grade in math, like if it's just because you didn't like your teacher or you dropped football because you just like weren't feeling it, I don't think that's a great reason. It's an excuse, right? So I just wouldn't mention it. And that's okay. I mean, it's not the end of the world. It's not going to be a make or break. If you've got a C or D on your application and there's no explanation, that might be a make or break, honestly, for some of the highly selective schools. That's something you'd want to explain. Okay. This is nice. An overly complex abstract from a scientific paper. So telling me you cured ICD-9 140-239 doesn't mean much to me. Sorry, I'm not a PhD in chem. This is from a rep at Tufts. She says, if you're going to talk about it, simplify it. Using common language shows a much greater depth of understanding than copying and pasting an unnecessarily complex research proposal. So this is not different from what I'm saying for the when you're doing the IB extended essay. Make sure that by the end of it, you've really connected it back to like what it means. And like I said, keep it short. Don't go on and on. Pasting a resume. Yeah, I don't think if you want to paste your resume if you've got your activities list. So that's the fifth thing I would say. Why not? Why don't you paste your activities list? I just think it's redundant. I think that you've already got that. They've already got that information. Admissions readers are reading so much. We want to respect their time, and it kind of looks insecure. Like, hey, like you're really like trying too hard, and it's redundant. That's a joke. Okay, that's the activities list and the additional info. Let's get to the why us. Here's the complete guide to the why us. It's in your college essay guide login. Have you read it yet? If not, what is wrong with you? No, I'm joking. Just read it. Read it tonight. It's 20 pages long. It'll take you like 20 minutes to read it, maybe 25 minutes. Inside, you'll find some of these tips. So I'm just going to highlight some of these, especially for those of you who are just lazy and who are not going to read it. Don't write about the school's size, location, reputation, or the weather. I don't want to hear about how it's like they've got a great faculty to student ratio, or it just has great professors. Why? Take a hint from Emory. So Emory used to say, this was their actual why us. Many students apply to Emory based on our size, location, reputation, and yes, the weather. In other words, everybody's writing on those things. So they said, besides these valid reasons, so please do not write about these things. Why is Emory a particularly good match for you? Now, why do they say this? Obviously, that's what everybody's doing. So here's my advice. I'm going to go one step further. If you can find anything that could have appeared in another student's essay, delete it. What? Yeah. You might be like, well, what am I supposed to say? Well, we'll get to that in a second. 2, don't think of this as a why them essay. You don't need to tell the school why they're so awesome. Erica Sanders from University of Michigan said in a session once, she's like, don't tell me about the Michigan bus system. I know it's great. I take it every day. She doesn't care about that. She cares about why you. Why are you? And so it's us is not just us. Why us, the school? It's why us. Why are we a good match? And you might think of this as like a date with somebody where they're sitting across from you at the dinner table and the candle lights are flickering and they're like, so why do you like me? And you're like, because you're hot. It's like, whoa, what? Or because you have a good reputation, or because I love your faculty to student ratio. Like, if it's a good looking person, that's what everybody says. That doesn't really get below the surface about why you're a good match, because you're hot and I like hot people, because you are well regarded and I like well regarded schools. Okay. So what do you do instead? Think of it as a why we are perfect for each other essay and get real specific, real specific. What do I mean? How do you do this? Fold a piece of paper in half, like legit, do this. And then just in one half, what I want, and the other, what they have. You're not going to be able to dream up what they have. This is a research essay, y'all. So it's part research, but it's also part personal, still connecting, what do you want to get out of college? If you think of that, if you took that personal statement course with me, I talked to you about what are some of the values that are going to make you a great, whatever the career is you're going to go to. This is kind of an extension of that. It's like, what values do you want to continue developing and drawing on? And how are you going to develop and draw on those at this particular institution? I say get 10 to 15 reasons. Why? Because then it's going to allow you to pick the best ones for your essay. You might end up working in 10 to 15 reasons. In fact, I'll show you an essay in a second that does 14 reasons in less than 200 words. So it's possible you may use them all, but odds are you're going to use probably a fewer than that. But I'd say do 10 to 15 because if you just do 2 to 3, chances are you haven't really found the best reasons yet. This is going to take an hour at least, maybe more, probably more. But I'm going to ask for you tonight to spend at least half an hour to an hour on this before the next session. The YS research chart, which is in your guide, is super simple. You don't even need the chart to do this, right? Maybe because it's formatted with the different columns, but you can do this, handwritten if you want. Why does this help? It can take your essay from this, Michigan's well-known legacy, its fantastic football team, and spectacular location in Ann Arbor are just a few reasons why I believe UM is the place for me. Fail, super generic, does all the wrong things. Michigan knows that it's all those things. To this, I look forward to academic argumentation. And he lists the course code. You don't have to list the course code. And professional writing. As I believe these courses will provide me with a firm basis in journalistic writing technique and improve my abilities to write analytically and develop well-supported arguments. But bam! Look how specific, y'all. I look forward to X and Y as they will help me in this very specific Z way. That's the format for your YS essay. I want 10 to 15 of those, okay? Don't just give me 10 to 15 things there. Give me 10 to 15 things that connect back to you with the specific language that you're seeing here. Furthermore, the professional writing course, here's another one, X, will teach me what? How to write in a concise, straightforward style, a skill vital to a journalist. Well, bam, right? Here's the thing, X, and here's the way it's going to help me, Z. And notice how, this is like a bonus, he's written this in a concise, straightforward way. That's just like bonus. Like a boss. Number 5, the difference between a school that you're just kind of excited about, which is like probably all the maybes, the schools that you're probably going to get into, and the one you're really excited about, which is the one that you're probably not going to get into, is really just doing research. Okay, so if you're like so stoked on UPenn, but you're more likely to get into, I don't know, name another school that probably any other school, right? If you do some research, guys, you'll find, I think, some cool things will happen. Think of this like a new pair of shoes. Okay, the school that is on the maybe and on the likelies, and I think it's really important to visit these schools. Everybody wants to visit the top ranked schools, but it's like, you're probably going to like it. It's probably pretty awesome. They've got a ton of money, a ton of resources. Unless you're, a high flyer, which is like perfect everything and amazing, ridiculous extracurriculars, you can pick which Ivy League school. You're probably in the middle pool with everybody else, which is to say, visit these schools and do some research. Because if you do some research, you might find that, like that new pair of shoes that doesn't quite fit, you start to kind of get a little like used to it. And you're like, oh, you know what? This could actually work. Fit, which is to say what school you'll fit in. It's not a passive process. It's not like sometimes people just expect to like magically like find the school. It takes work. It's like any relationship. Okay. This is like relationship day. School research is metaphorically walking around in the new shoes. Here's a short essay by a student who initially wasn't super stoked about the school, but after he did some research, he warmed up to it. It's for Tufts. He says, in addition to providing a strong foundation in economics, Tufts provides me the opportunity to further explore global healthcare policy through an international relations program that leverages the strengths of 18 related departments and programs. Okay, now that's a little Tufts heavy, but it's okay because one thing that you don't know this about him, but he's going to explore global healthcare policy. And what he's saying is like, Tufts is the place to explore global healthcare policy. Here's my proof. Here are these 18 related departments and programs. I'm also keen to study Chinese, studying with this particular professor and maybe studying abroad at this particular place. See how specific? The experimental college intrigues me as I can take unconventional courses like this one and that one. And now, look, could you conceivably just switch out these variables for another school? Yeah, but you'd be surprised how few students actually get this specific. In fact, I just heard that from an admissions rep when I presented on this at a conference like 6 weeks ago. And someone asked that question. They're like, isn't this what every student does? And she's like, oh, no, this is like a small minority of students. I'm going to tell you in a second about how to do better than this. But look how specific. Further, Tufts' urban backdrop provides me the opportunity to play league cricket year-round, to train for my bid to become the first jumbo on the U.S. national cricket team while studying abroad. Okay, so you might be like, yeah, right, you're going to play on the U.S. national team. Well, this happened to be a student who was on the national Singapore team. So putting this made sense. And that's like, oh, okay. So while studying abroad at Oxford would provide me with the with not only global economic perspectives, but also the opportunity to continue my pursuit of cricket in its birthplace. So, okay, this opportunity, this program they have at Oxford would match him in at least two ways. Visiting Tufts, my mother's alma mater, by the way. Now, they'll ask you that. You know, one of the questions that you answer for most schools is, did anybody in your family go here? But this is just one more mention, because this is going to probably be a little bump in his application chances. He says, I felt I was at home in Singapore. Its strengths in Chinese, econ, and international relations, combined with its beautiful suburban campus, academic rigor, and global reach, have confirmed that Tufts is the place for me. I mean, it's not the end of the world if he happened to like the way the campus looked, but the emphasis is not on that, right? It's not like it was so beautiful. No, guys, like your landscaping is like off the hook, like for real. So in this case, he's got 14 reasons in 196 words. That's really good. Do I want to say this now or in a minute? Okay, I'm going to say this now. This is not his top school. This was not his top school. He had other schools he wanted to get into more, but he does a really good job of finding a lot of things to love about the school. This is going to be true for most of your schools that you're applying to. And this is the technique, what I'm suggesting, how you write this, and this is how it sounds. How to level this up. How do you do better? And I'll show you some examples of this in just a second. The way to write a better YS essay is to find something that's so particular to that school that no other school has it, and you fit it better than just about anybody you know. Okay. And again, I'll give you an example of that in a second. But most of the YS essays are in like the 90th percentile, which is, or like, I'll say this, like this kind of puts you into the top 10 or, 15% of YS essays if you do something like this. But to get up into the top 5%, in other words, to really give them a sense of why you want to go to that school, then you've got to find something incredibly specific that feels like, oh, this kid is a great fit. Now, let's step back a second, because I haven't really addressed this yet. Why are YS essays important? Why do colleges care? Are they looking more at your personal statement? Well, here's this, guys. Let me throw this your way. Some reps say that they look more at the YS statement than the personal statement. Well, now, why might this be? Now, I'm going to share with you one more resource. Let me just click over to this really quick. It has to do with something called demonstrated interest. Demonstrated interest. Okay, let me say a few words about this because it's directly relevant to the YS. In this blog post, which I highly recommend you read because, well, I'll show you why, because why are we even talking about this? So this is what colleges look at. And this was something that came from a survey that the National Association of College Admissions Counselors did in 2015, asking colleges, what do they which factors most? Like, what do they care about most? What you'll notice here is that 79% of colleges attributed considerable importance to the grades in their college prep courses. And, the strength of your curriculum, super important to colleges, right? Your admission test scores is next. 55% of colleges said that's super important. Next comes the essay. Then comes your counselor recommendation, and then students' demonstrated interest. Now, what is demonstrated interest? It's basically, and I explain this in the blog post, showing colleges that if you are accepted, that you are likely to attend there. And it's 2 spots below the essay. So that's why I'm spending a few minutes on this. Why do they want to know which students are likely to enroll? Well, they've got something called a target enrollment number, which is they're trying to basically hit a particular number. If they go above that number, in other words, if they accept too many students, we got a problem. We got too many people coming for dinner and not enough seats. If they go underneath that, then they've basically undershot and they've got all that money that's not coming in. So they need to nail it. So that's why they want to know, okay, if we accept, who's likely to accept us? It's like a game that they're playing. This is like the biggest job of these, they're called enrollment managers. They also want to protect their yield. Now, what is the yield? That's the percentage of students decide to enroll at a particular college after being accepted. In other words, if Northwestern offers 10, they accept 10 students and all 10 accept, that's great, 100% yield, which means everyone loves Northwestern and it seems awesome. Now, another reason that this is important is that they want to know who's likely to stay at school, because if a bunch of students drop out, that doesn't look good either. Now, why is this a good thing? Why do they want to know about this? Because one, they want to seem desirable, right? But 2, because it's directly related to not only their reputation, but to the US News and World Report rankings, which tracks yield. In other words, which is the most popular school? Who's the most desired % yield or something? So colleges want to know, in short, who really loves us, right? Because this is directly related to their bottom line. Now, how do they track demonstrated interest? This is really important. Can you tell? Here are a bunch of ways that students track, or that colleges track demonstrated interest. You don't need to delve into these. This is going to be part of your homework. But, if you interview with the school, if you go and visit the campus, if you on their email list, I'll get more into that in just a minute. Given this information, what should you do? First of all, you should freak out. No, I'm kidding. You should do nothing. Okay. So just call them, take a breath. There's literally nothing you have to do based on this information. You're still, you can still get into a great school. But if you decide that there are some, you might want to demonstrate some interest, you might want to spend some time developing your college list. Why? Because it's good to know which schools you're applying to. Because if you're going to apply to, just 8 schools, well, that'll kind of whittle it down. Because once you get to the small number of schools that you're applying to, which is like 8 to 10, then pick some schools you'd like to demonstrate interest to. Now, wait. First, you got to know, does that school track demonstrated interest? Because, for example, the Ivy League schools don't track demonstrated interest. They don't care. The University of California schools, they don't care. So how do you find out? Google it. Does this school track demonstrated interest? What you'll find is something called the school's common data set. What is the common data set? Well, this is information that the school gives out. They answer a questionnaire that lets folks know what's important to them. And every school does this. So, for example, this is Loyola Marymount University. Level of applicants' interest. Do they care? No, not considered. So, does it matter? Probably not. Now, I say probably not because this is also kind of a moving target. So just to throw another wrench into things, sometimes this changes. So their common data set information may not be updated. So, in other words, LMU may, say that we don't track demonstrated interest, but they may actually track it. Here's Bates College. So Bates, level of applicants' interest is important. They want to know, do you love us? So should you demonstrate interest? If you decide that you would like to do it, don't do this now, but here are 13 ways in order of how the college process goes that you can demonstrate interest, including getting on the school's email list, opening the emails you receive, making sure to actually click on something in the email because that's probably being tracked if they're tracking. Spending time on the school's website to get to know, do you actually want to go there? Anyway, here are a bunch of other ways to do it and how long it's going to take you. Again, I don't want to stress you out with this. So know that you don't have to do this and you can do this in small chunks if you want. Another thing, if you want to build a relationship with your rep, which is to say, reach out to the person who is potentially going to read your application, you can do that. You can find out who that is just by Googling it, and you can ask a question that you're genuinely interested in. So here's some tips for building that relationship. Finally, I want to show you this. So if you're interested in, another way to do it is to apply early decision or early action. If you're trying to decide whether or not to do that, and there's a lot to say about it, so I'm not going to get into it all right now. I'm going to get into it on a future podcast. But here's a PDF that compares the early decision acceptance rates with the regular decision acceptance rates. So, for example, it might be interesting to note that at Bates, if you apply regular decision, you've got an 18% chance of getting in. And this is in 2015 because this was made in 2016. But if you apply early decision, you've got a 45.8% chance. Or an American, you've got a 32% chance of getting in regular and an 87% chance of getting ED. Should you apply ED? If you're really interested in American, probably, right? This is really important. And you can find this on that site that I just linked, or just Google College Essay Guide Demonstrated Interest. Okay. This is an amazing resource. Jenny and Jeff spent a ton of time on this. How did they create it? They had tons of conversations with schools. They looked at lots and lots of common data sets, and they put this amazing resource together. They're going to be updating it. I'm going to be hosting them on the podcast in a few weeks. So cool. Let me just click back to my Prezi. This is important, huh? Let me just, I think that's all I want to say about that. And I'll just say, go ahead and read that. You'll also see in the YS guide, just a school or a student that just picks one reason and goes really in depth on that. That's a great one too to check out. In the YS guide, if you haven't read it already, I give you resources to find out about a school, how to reuse your YS essay, and how not to, and then how to write a next level YS. What else? What else? That's it. So that your homework before session 3 is going to be to complete this chart, this YS essay chart. And I'm going to send you here in just a second, but let me give you the homework. So the homework is going to be, we'll go back to this in just a second. I want you to up level your activities list using the 3 exercises we covered. Okay. And I'll mention this again at the end, but I want you to go and do the BBs with your activities list exercise activities, or use the CEG epic verbs list, or do the values scan, which is to say, how many values am I revealing in each activity? If you want to do all 3, you can, but I want you to spend like 30 minutes on this. Okay. And write the second draft of your activities list. Next, I want you to research the longest Why Us essay you've got, or the one that you're most passionate about writing, because then you'll be most motivated, but probably the longest. So if you've got one of those 500, say you're applying to Michigan, or, you're applying to UPenn or one of these schools that has a 650, go for that, Cornell. And I want you to write a first draft of your Why Us essay, because I'll be taking a look at a couple of them tomorrow on the session. So write a draft. So go ahead and research, and if you can, write a draft. If you haven't already, please do read the YS guide. It'll take you like 20 minutes. And please make sure you do the BBS exercise for 1 to 3 of your potential super topics. That was yesterday's homework, as I'm going to share the second part of how to create a super essay. But you'll need to do that pre-work in order for this to really work. So make sure you do that. Okay, that's your homework. And now I want you to follow me to this doc. So www.tinyurl.com, 3 CEGY us examples student. I know that's kind of long. That's not a tiny URL at all. That's a long URL. Whoops. Fail. Hang on. Sorry, that didn't work. Give me a second. I will edit that. Here. Sorry about that. I was like saying to myself, I should probably check it before I send it out. Examples is missing an E. That's why. Thank you. So maybe I did do okay. Examples. Thank you. Good looking out, Max. See if it works now. It does. Okay. So thanks, Max. I just typed it wrong. That's why I shouldn't do it. I should actually do an actual tiny URL. Okay. Before we get into this, I know we're over time in a way, but these are going to be essentially considered, we'll do some Q&A, I promise, but I want to go into these examples because they're going to be really useful. But I want to take a 2-minute break just so that I can get some water and pause, and so that you can potentially write some questions. So now that I've given you all this context and all this information, feel free to light up the chat box. 2 minutes of questions and 2-minute bio break. If you need to run to the restroom, do it, come back. Then we'll look at these YS examples and we'll take your questions. I will take your questions. All right. All right. So I'm going to switch my Prezio. Why Northwestern? On my visit to Evanston, my tour guide walked backwards, facing me the entire time. This struck me as symbolic of Northwestern. Okay, that's a cool hook. And by the way, guys, if you're going to do a hook, keep it super short in your YS. Keep the hook really short, especially if it's short as 300 words, okay? And it's kind of intriguing. Well, how is this symbolic of Northwestern? So it raises a question, right? Firstly, while walking backwards, my guide made a special effort to connect with me. And I too shall reach out to my communities at Northwestern. Okay, so there's a value, connecting, right? As a member of the undergrad chemistry team, I'll join the chemistry council and connect with local students to mentor green chemistry projects for their schools, expanding on my work with high school chem club. Okay, cool. So this is what she's done is, and you'll see in a second, she's created 3 umbrellas, which is to say 3 things related to this metaphor, this walking backwards thing. My guide also walked without seeing, venturing into the unknown. Okay, you see what she's doing here? I shall complement my primary training in chemistry with the Institute for Sustainability and Energy certificate program. Don't sleep on the details. So if you do decide to do something clever like this, the information is king or queen of primary importance, right? Notice that she's doing this clever take, but she's making sure to hit the details. Why? To study disciplines unknown to the core science curriculum that nonetheless impact science research. Environmental law and policy interest me, since law and policy govern the limitations with which chemists design products. Why? This is the why or the so what. Okay? Definitely include this. The pending Personal Care Products Safety Act will require safety assessments of ingredients, thereby expanding innovative research to transform the cosmetics industry. ISEN also supports multidiscipline research, and I hope to research toxicology of ingredients. Okay, so specific reasons, connecting back to her, this, answering why, great. Finally, my guide took us on detours into Norris, an empty classroom, and even to the Lakeville. I, too, hope to take inspiring digressions. See where she's doing this? The amazing theater community at Northwestern excites me the most. Now, this was a student who wanted to study science and chemistry, and she wrote about makeup in her main essay, but theater was something that she hadn't covered yet, and there's no other supplement for Northwestern, so I'll say this wasn't covered in main application. Even though she'd identified as a theater girl. She had a ton of theater stuff, credits, we'll say. So I've been a performer since preschool, studying ballet, singing, and theater. Now, so just saying that is like, well, could she put that somewhere else? Well, knowing that she's a theater person and has been studying dance and theater, like Northwestern is a theater school. Like that's the arts are so important on campus. So that's legit. I mean, that's connecting to the school. Acting on stage is the most exhilarating experience I know. And working with the theater tech staff on stage makeup is a great way to, so the stage makeup thing connects to her main essay because that's what the topic for that. And make new friends. I hope to get off my main academic track often, enroll in acting for non-majors and stage makeup courses. Now, this is a little bit general because other schools have this, but hey, she's got 300 words. You don't have to go crazy with this and join the many student theater groups. 4 years at Northwestern will seem too brief. A little bit general, but that's okay. This is like, could have been more specific, but again, she does a pretty good job for 300 words. What's the format here? You find a metaphor, which she does here, and she does 3 different umbrellas, we'll call them, which allows her to talk about 3 different, ways that she connects with Northwestern. The connection, the venturing into the unknown, and how Northwestern does that. I.e. How the tour guide did it, and how she's like, I will venture into the unknown too. Detours, I'm going to do detours, right? So here's the next one, and this is the example that I gave of the level up one. But before we get into it, look at the prompt. Listen to this. NYU is global, urban, inspired, smart, connected, and bold. What can NYU offer you, and what can you offer NYU? Be creative, people. Look at that. They put an exclamation point. This is actually in the prompt. Tell us what gets you up in the morning. What keeps you up at night? Tell us how you. Notice the word you is mentioned 3 times. You 3 times before they get back to the school. Right? That says this is important. Where more students study abroad than any other university. Tell us about your ambitions and how they would impact the largest independent research university in America. Okay. Tell us about how you would contribute to our campuses, how you would contribute. Tell us how you would improve. And by the way, Columbia they have a specific question that asks, how would you contribute to our campus? Like what's a difference that you would make? They want to know about this. Who are we getting when we're getting you? How would you contribute to this team if it's like a sports, a basketball player or something? Don't tell us what you think you want us to hear. Tell us who you are, what you'll do, how you would make us proud. You. Notice, see? Shift from don't tell us about us, tell us about you. Show us what you've got and have some fun with it. Okay, look at this essay. I may have been born in California, but I'm a New Yorker at heart. From walking the streets of Forest Hill, where my dad grew up, to eating lobster rolls at Smorgasbord, from visiting Yankee Stadium's Monument Park, to enjoying the Halal Guy's grub, my roots, my passions are all NYC. But if there's one thing that connects me to New York more than anything, it's sports. My room's a shrine to the captain, Derek Jeter, and my Google profile pic is of Knicks rookie Kristaps Porzingis. Yeah, really. Whether it's factoids, history, uniforms, stadiums, or fantasy leagues, I just can't get enough of the world of sports, and NYC is its capital. Okay, now you might be thinking, this is a little too much sports for this essay, unless this guy wants to go into sports. Well, here you go. NYU offers the opportunity to develop the skills I need in economics, business, and media to one day work in the front office of a professional sports team. Okay, this is the thesis. I think this is a great idea. Why? Because it sets us up for what's to come. How? Economics, business, media. These are the three parts of working in the front office that are going to connect, that he's going to be writing about for this essay. So this is like AP English style, right? I think it's okay. It's okay for a YS. Why? You're giving here's the reason, here's the thing. My thesis is I am a perfect fit and NYU is a perfect fit for me. And here's my proof to support it. Okay? The Institute for Sports Management, Media, and Business affords the perfect marriage of a strong academic foundation and an experiential learning education. So it's academics and experiential. How? While the core curriculum will instruct me on the intricacies of the industry, from finance and development to licensing and merchandising, a concentration in sports media will further my understanding of defining the success of a sports franchise, promoting effective media distribution, and perfecting the packaging of sports and entertainment events. Zing! We get it. Okay. We get it. In other words, what I mean by this is we get that this is your major and that you understand what you're going to be learning. This is some next level stuff. What do I mean by this? I just encouraged him to get really, really specific. And after 3 or 4 times, he finally got this specific. So it's okay, I see why it makes sense. And here's why this essay is next level. Because are you starting to get that NYU might be a really, really good fit just based on even his opening couple paragraphs? So the first one, I was born and bred, not just I visited a couple times, but New York City's in my blood. And I'm just happen to be a super fan. So this is an example, and this is what makes it different from the Tufts essay that we read of a clear match. This is clearly a good fit for him, and I feel it. Now, what I'll say to students oftentimes, and I'm working with a couple right now that have a top choice and they've written their first drafts, and I told them both, I was I don't feel it yet. I don't feel that this is your top choice. I want you to make me feel it. How do you do it? With evidence, not just emotional language. I would die to go to this school, but give me evidence to support that. Why is it a perfect fit? Next paragraph. I'm also interested in pursuing a concentration in sports law or organizational management, which would teach me about the complexities of contract negotiations, collective bargaining, and the dynamics of a professional sports organization. Great. Next paragraph. Outside the classroom. Good. So we didn't just if we did more inside the classroom stuff, it might start to get repetitive. Let's get outside the classroom. I see myself attending the Arthur Miller Public Dialogues and the Distinguished Lecture Series. Why? It's going to be important. Why? Because anybody could say that. To gain insight into sports as an evolving and globalized industry. Ooh. And as a diehard Yankees, Knicks, and Giants fan, I'd relish the opportunity to intern at one of those organizations. Okay. Everybody says they want to intern. Yes. You say where? This is internship 2.0. In other words, he's given us a clear reason that makes sense. That's I could see you interning there. I could see why New York needs to be the place you need to be. Finally, NYU's Sports and Society program is the perfect environment to learn more about how the sports industry has a major impact on all areas of society, whether it's breaking down racial barriers. Wow. Okay. Now we're expanding out, curbing violence on and off the field, or the metamorphosis of sports in a multi-billion-dollar entertainment industry. Okay. He just took this next level again, and he took sports and he expanded it into a multidisciplinary thing. What do I mean by this? Endeavor, we'll call it, not a thing. In other words, sports is more than just sports. It also connects to racial barriers, so social and cultural things, curbing violence, again, another kind of a social issue, and how it's become a multi-billion-dollar entertainment industry. So now he said this is more than sports. This is about more than sports. This is something that you guys can do at the beginning of your essay too. You can take your thing, whatever it is, and talk about the different elements. Let me explain this more slowly. Go back to his thesis. So if he's going to work in the front office, what are the elements he's going to need to pursue? Economics, business, and media. In some sense, then, what he's pursuing, what he's going to study, is interdisciplinary because it combines economics, business, and media. Guys, anything that you study can be interdisciplinary. Really. Look at the journalism essay, for example, on the Why Us packet, on the Why Us guide, page 8. He says that in terms of studying journalism, he's going to be interested in literature, media, and perhaps law. And each one of those is going to be a paragraph in his essay. So consider that whatever you're interested in studying, if you know, and again, this is for students, if you know. If you don't know, I'll talk to you in just a second. If you know what you want to study, talk to me about how your pursuit, whatever the thing is you want to study, is interdisciplinary and how you need to study 3 different things or more in order to be a really well-rounded person in this career. That's what he's doing here. Let's see. And then he says, attending the events will provide insight into the ethical and philosophical inner workings of the industry. Maybe I'll even get to meet the Porzing God at one. So that's the guy he mentioned from the Knicks. So for a kid whose family brainwashed him to be the ultimate NYC sports fan, so there's some humor even, and humor here. So you can be funny here, right? What better place to get my education than NYU? Also, he totally didn't go to NYU. But what a great Why Us, right? And what a great fit. Like if I'm reading this and I'm NYU, I'm like, we're accepting this kid because he's probably going to want to come here. Okay, because he's awesome and he fits here. He would be awesome. And he would have been great at NYU. Okay. So let me give you one more example of how to make your whatever you want to study interdisciplinary. Third one. Jacqueline Novogratz used financial investments in Wall Street as a vehicle to help others. It's a shame she's less well known than Bernie Madoff. By majoring in econ and minoring, and that's the hook, real short, one sentence. Here's the thesis. By majoring in econ and minoring in philosophy at USC, I hope to gain knowledge and perspectives to become, here's the thesis, a socially conscientious investment banker. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do. How am I going to do it? Econ, philosophy. So now we know kind of what the essay is going to be about, which in this case I think is an okay thing. But it's the specifics that are going to provide us insight into why you want to do the thing you want to do and whether or not you're a fit. To be successful, I'll need knowledge of how to raise capital via the Wall Street Network. Okay, so I got to learn some money stuff, right? So we get it, how to raise capital. Courses like financial markets will allow me to examine how Wall Street functions in the American economy, while Intro to Econometrics will help me develop quantitative analysis skills for evaluating the market. Notice how these are different, y'all. So this class is going to help me in this one way, while this class is going to help me in this other way. Now, here's the thing. Are these potentially at another school? Yes. So see if you can make sure you can find courses that are unique to the school, but make sure that whatever courses you list, that the reasons are different, that they're going to put different tools on your belt. Okay. So again, here's the structure. Here's the thing I'm going to be or do, and here are the reasons that the things that I need to learn, and here's how I'm going to learn them. When I learn them, here's the specific way that it's going to help me. I'll need a global perspective to understand how Wall Street impacts the broader world economy, and I'm very interested in behavioral economics. Here's another reason, another thing that connects to being a socially conscientious investment banker. By pairing courses like this and this, I hope to not only discover the economic reasoning that motivates people, so this is like psychology, but also how individual actions can accumulate to have effects on a macroeconomic scale. So economics, cool. Do you see how it's interdisciplinary? I also love big questions. And he doesn't say it here, but this is the philosophy thing. For example, why are people attracted to money in the first place? Does capitalism foster immorality? Now we've got a whole different value that he's expressing and exploring here. Issues I hope to tackle through USC's thematic option in a course like Culture and Values. I hope to confront the universal problems that I may experience throughout my life, so that if I come close to making a harmful decision, I can step back and existentially evaluate my choices. As a Trojan, I hope to explore my existing passions while creating new ones. A little bit general, but that's okay. I want you to see again, socially conscientious investment banker. Okay. And there are these different elements. I need to learn money stuff, but get real specific with what the money stuff is. It's also going to help me develop, in terms of psychology, in terms of economics, so that it's more than just, I want to learn how to make bank, right? And I want to learn how to make a lot of money. Okay. So I know that's a lot and we're way over time. I'm okay with it. Q&A. I'm for it. Let me pause for a second, catch my breath, so you can come up with some questions. Actually, let me just pause so that you'll have time to think of your questions. And then I'm going to answer one of the questions that I said I'd answer, which is, how do you write this if you don't have your major picked out? So if you were writing that, you can pause right now, and I'll just answer that first. You don't know what you want to study. Now, here's what I'll say, is that the best essays that I've read were focused on students who knew what they wanted to study. So option A, you can do a placeholder. What I mean by this is pick something you're interested in and make a case for it via the school's opportunities. You might change your major. That's okay. Make sure that whatever you're making the case for isn't a program that's more difficult to get into. For example, and I don't want to play this game too much right now, but like, if it's a popular major, it's probably harder to get into. If it's a less popular major, like Italian or neuroscience, it's probably easier to get into. I'll just say that generally. That's some general advice. But don't ask me like, is it harder to get into X school with Y major? Because I don't know. But if you can pick something that you're interested in and make a case for it, as these students have done, because who knows if the students end up doing this, but they're making a good case for it, that can work. Option B, still do the interdisciplinary thing. In other words, what these students were doing, is they're splitting the major into, three different aspects. But do it with you. In other words, you are the major. Another way of saying this is, what are 3 different, things you'd like to study? Or it doesn't have to be things you want to study, but it's just reasons, that what the school has to offer. So 2 different things the school has that will help you level up. You, okay? Now, this is harder to do, and I haven't seen great ones. In fact, when I was thinking about this earlier, I was like, can I think of a great essay that's done this? And I haven't really seen an essay. So maybe you'll write it this year if you don't know what you want to study and you want to take this approach. But essentially, it's like, you pick a school, like, let me just pick Northwestern because I know a lot about it. And I don't know what I want to study, but I know that I'm interested in theater and I'm interested in, the girl in science, who's interested in engineering. I'll just pick engineering because they're also great for engineering. And I'm also interested in, so I'm interested in improv comedy. I'm interested in jazz performance, and I'm interested in, getting my tech stuff on. All 3 of those you'll find at Northwestern. And what I would need to do in that essay was connect each one of those to how, these are all things that are burning passions, within me. And, so essentially, it won't have the neater or the smaller umbrella of they all connect into this major. And look, even if you do say, here are a couple things under this major, again, you can change your major, but it could be that some of the, like a reason or 2 is actually connected to, something that has nothing to do with the major. So for example, the girl who did the Northwestern essay at the top, she knew her major was going to be chemistry, but then she went, okay, stuff other than chemistry that's like academically related, and then extracurricular opportunities focused on theater, because she listed a bunch of other stuff. And I was like, let's just pick one thing. And so she picked theater because she felt like it was an aspect of herself that she hadn't really gotten a chance to show in the application yet. So that's my answer to that potential question. What other questions do we have? Let's take a look. Let's see. Okay, sorry, there are a bunch. Here we go. I'll try to go through them quickly. Should you disclose? Okay, so there's a variety of questions related to the why us and not. So I'm going to go from the why us questions down. So what about the 100-word why us? Do you still talk about interdisciplinary? Great question, Yvonne. Just as much as you can. I mean, you might just have to focus on one thing. So you might not have time to do it. So if it's for, Yale, or I think MIT is really short and Caltech is really short, you may just need to focus on one particular thing. So maybe don't do this for the 100-word. Claire, are you required to provide dates on your activities list? In the past, you've been required to, but the new Common App, who knows? I imagine that you probably will, but we'll know more in a week when it's released. So I would say, and for those of you watching recorded, consult the Common App to see. Do we have to require hours on our activity list like you put on the activity guide? Yeah. So you'll want to put in the hours and be honest. Sort of a weird question, says Leon. Does running half marathons count as an activity? Yes. Do colleges want more academic? No, it doesn't matter. That's fine, Leon. Brendan asked, do you suggest writing the additional info section as a paragraph or bullet points? Either one is fine, Brendan. So I would say bullet point it first and then turn it into a paragraph, because it's going to be more on the side of bullet points. It also depends on how much stuff you have to say. Either way, it's going to need to be super succinct. And if you write bullet points, it'll help you stay succinct, because you can't hide behind bullet points. And you won't get tripped up in like the how do I say this? Just do it super direct. Kenny asks, how do we work with you in private like that? Do you have an office or online? Kenny, I work with a small number of students. You can email me through the website. If you didn't have a tutor and you got a 1590 on SAT, first try, should you mention that on the additional info? It might sound like bragging, Chloe, but you could say that. I think it would matter. Here's the thing, Chloe, this is a great question, because sometimes when students do stuff like that, I think it's kind of endearing. Like, for example, if on Adrian's application, because of the challenges he's been through, if he were to be like, oh, and by the way, I got a 1590 in the SAT by self-studying, we'd be like, what? Given all the challenges. So it may depend, and I hope I'm not creating this as a rule, but it may depend. Let me speak more generally. It depends probably on the context of your application. And if you're just like a rock star in all these areas, and also you got a 1590 on the first try without studying or without any professional help, then, it might seem like bragging. So I guess I'd have to see more of the application, Chloe. Where did he go if not NYU? I think he decided to go. He was between USC and Michigan. I think he went to USC. Sports schools. He wanted sports. Let's see. Sorry. Let's see. I participated. Okay. Malak says, I've participated in selective math programs at the University of Chicago. Should I make mention of my participation for demonstrated interest for U Chicago? Yeah, definitely mention that, Malak, and especially if you're applying to U Chicago, definitely mention that in your YS statement, because they have a YS essay that you'll need to write. We're going to get into the other U Chicago questions on session 4, but for your YS, for sure, put that in. That's awesome. Other questions? Will you dive into examples of the formatting of an activities list? How do you mean formatting, Lauren? Because the formatting is just 150 character descriptions. So you've got 50 characters for the title and 150 characters on the activities list. So this is something that I explained in the guide that you read for homework. So that's the format. If there's more than you want to know, let me know. Should we never explain bees, or is that just in general? I guess, I don't know. What would be the context, Angel? Like, is there a reason? I mean, I probably don't explain a bee, because what is there to explain? Like, you got a bee, it's, unless there's like a good reason why it feels like you would want to draw attention to it. But otherwise it might just be one of those things. It seems like you're overly obsessed with academics. What if you like a specific part, such as the U Chicago Library with the 7 million books? Is that still bad? Not if you can connect it to a specific reason, because Angel, that's going to be something that, a lot of students are writing about, right? That, look at the big library you guys have. But if it connects, if you're like, I don't know, I'm not going to write the reason for you, but if you can connect it to a specific reason for you, then go for it. But otherwise, I wouldn't just say generally, just assume that I know why I would like 7 million books. And also, I don't know, can't you get most of that on the internet now? That's kind of a side thing, a conversation my brother and I have been having about how much do libraries matter anymore. Should you disclose or mention dyslexia? If not, mention your personal statement. If you feel like it's relevant, Alyssa. For some students, I don't know if I mentioned this. I had a student I worked with 2 years ago who had a hearing loss thing, but he didn't want to write his main essay on it. And he said, it's not a big deal. Like, he was mostly deaf, I think, in one ear. And so he just mentioned it. Just here's a fact in his additional info. I don't know. I mean, it just depends on how it's impacted you. If you've had certain accommodations and you've overcome certain challenges, you might mention those, but you don't have to. It just depends on what it means to you. If someone wrote a book about you saying you influenced them, and I think I should mention it, where would this info be categorized? Is someone who'd written a book about you? Wow, that's awesome. Where would this be categorized? I would put that in the additional info. That would be really cool, unless there's a cool reason for a supplemental essay, but that would be an interesting thing potentially for the additional info. Alyssa, I chose NYU's summer theater program over Northwestern. Will they know I was offered a space and declined at Northwestern? No, they won't know. They don't talk about that stuff. I don't imagine they share that information. Shabam asks, is discussing a close family member diagnosed with cancer cliche? So the topic is common, but how you talk about it is what matters. So what I say about that, and I talk about this on the personal statement course, is, it's all about how you tell it. It's going to be harder to write about that because a lot of students write about it. Do you have another topic? Is racism another common topic? I think it's easier to write a great racism essay than diagnose a family member with cancer, because I'm guessing the racism thing happened to you, or happened to someone. I don't know. I would go of those two without knowing anything more about you. I'd be more interested in the second topic, how the act of racism impacted you. But that's more on the main statement. I want to make sure we're focusing on supplemental essays, just so we stay a little bit focused. What else? I'm going way back. Connor asks, let's say if I only did a sport activity for a year, that's fine, including the application, or explain why I dropped. Yeah, I think so. Or just keep it off. I think explain it in the application and why it dropped, because it's another thing that you did. It counts. Let's see. I went to a different school junior year, so some of my activities continue over, but with different clubs and different responsibilities, like debate. Can I include those activities under one activity on the list? Yeah, if you want to, for sure. You can also explain if there's anything that might be confusing. Just look at your application with a stranger's eyes and see if it makes sense. If it doesn't, that's what you want to explain. That may be obvious. Kashav says, what if I use DataCamp to get certificates in R and Python, but did it to learn for projects as a research assistant? Are those two separate activities? If I use DataCamp to get certificates in R and Python, but did it to learn for projects as a research assistant, I don't know. I don't know if there's two separate things. It also depends on how much else you have. Honestly, if you're trying to stretch and get to more activities, if you can justify that those are two separate things, sure. Be honest. I mean, it sort of is it's on you. I don't exactly know enough about that to understand if they would be separate or not. Let's see. I was a research intern and a co-author on a research paper. Awesome. Both from the same project. Should these be under two activities? If they were two clearly different things, if they're the same thing, then no, right? So you decide. But also, again, Andrew, it's in the context of, do you have other stuff to write about? If you are really struggling to find activities, you might put it as two. If you feel like you've got 10 activities, then you could include it already, then you'd include it under one. That's a good idea. Put it under one activity, research intern, and then discuss the research paper under additional information. Yeah, that's cool. Keep in mind that, and here's an interesting kind of, I guess I would call this inside baseball thing, that I feel like in the activities list, it might blend in a little bit. Whereas if you put in the additional info, I think it's a little bit more apt to stand out, because it's we're kind of on borrowed time there. And it's sort of okay, this better be important. And if you mention the getting published, you could also mention that in the awards, Andrew. You could mention getting published, because that counts as an award. And then expand on it in the additional info, because the awards blank is so short. So do that maybe just to make sure they get that. What if you did it for 20 weeks, but some weeks were 1 hour a week and other weeks were 4 hours a week? Do I take a weighted average? So one of the things that the Coalition app, which is not the Common App, it allows you to talk about the range. What did you do on the most weeks and what did you do on the fewest amount of weeks? The fewest number of, sorry. So it's when I was busiest, I did 10 hours. When I was least busy, I did 2 hours. So the Common App might be allowing you to do that this year. I don't know. It remains to be seen. It's going to be released in a few days. So there might be a way to do that. I would say, yeah, an average is fine. That's probably a good way to do that. That's what I've had past students do. Okay, that's all the questions. Let me go back up to see what the new questions are. Okay. I was okay. Got it. Should you add awards in the activities list, or is there a separate place for awards only? So, Natalie, it's as of last year, it's 10 activities, and then there are 5 separate awards and honors. Okay, so there's a separate place for awards, but that might be different this year. We'll see. I don't think it will be, but it might be. Kenny says, I've got a small online business where I go thrift shopping and flip the clothes for more money. That's awesome. I donate some of the profits to the Smile Train because I have a cleft. Boom. Where would I put this essay? I think you need to put it into your main essay, Kenny, because I know what your main essay topic is about. That's super cool because I think it's relevant, right? And it's another example. Oh my gosh, Kenny, we were talking about ways of sort of like processing and dealing with and like getting your needs met, right? And one of the ways is humor. Here's another way, Kenny, right? This totally connects to your main statement. Put it in there. If you are struggling to find things to write about for your supplemental essays, this could potentially be split. And it would just depend on what those other essays are. Oh, and by the way, I had a thought. When you asked me on session 1 about Furman University, I thought you were generally asking me about the school itself. And I didn't have any general thoughts. So I apologize if I was kind of curt. And I was like, I'm not going to talk about it. If you were asking about the essays, I do have thoughts on it, but I would need to know what the Furman essays are for this year because I just don't happen to have had students who applied to Furman in the last couple of years. So I don't know what those supplements are. So I'm happy to talk to you about those. I just don't happen to know what those supplements are yet. Okay. We're over time, but a couple more questions here. On the Common App, are you required to list what year you partook? Yes. And you guys will see this, like this logistics format stuff, you'll see it as soon as it comes out. Some of the stuff I know and some of the stuff I don't know. Claire asks, if you took the ACT twice and got the same composite score, but your worst and best scores flipped, and there's a reason for that, should we include the reason? If it's relevant, if it sounds like an explanation and not an excuse, Claire, then yes, that might be good information for them. Because I might wonder, like, why did the scores flip? Especially if it was like an extreme flip. If it was like, yeah. Natalie says, if you've been selected to participate in a fly-in program to different colleges, should you mention it? Yeah, that's great. You could count those as awards, or you can count those as additional info. And if you were selected, out of how many students were you selected and on what merits were you selected, you can put that in additional info. Now, some people might feel like, okay, that's a little too much, but this is the kind of stuff that's like that, you know, again, if it shows that you are motivated, ambitious, people see you as special, like, you know, it counts as an award, I think. You're welcome, Yin. You're welcome, Malak. Can you explain program-based supplemental essays? Say more what you mean. Program-specific supplemental essays. What is your specific question about that, Leon? Liam asks, is being selected as an academic All-American in a sport worthy of being listed as an award? Oh, yeah, for sure. Leon asks, what tips do you have for the short answer questions required, like list your 5 favorite movies? That's on session 5, Leon. And that tells me that you didn't listen to session 1. So go back and listen to session 1, Leon. And then we're going to be covering that in session 5. So don't worry. Sorry, a little shaming there. Connor asks, the way my hours are distributed per week and the number of weeks are inconsistent and sporadic. How should I report this? Just give an average. If you're self-conscious about it, just explain it in the additional info. Shabam asks, if you won awards and activities, can you include those in the activities lists and save the 5 awards for other stuff? Yes. Do your students tend to apply to certain schools or throughout the USA? Throughout the USA. Harrison is, I didn't care about school and I didn't plan on going to college in 9th grade, an adequate explanation for bad grades? I don't think so. I think it's an excuse because I don't think it's a good reason. Katrina, I was a lifeguard last year, but wasn't hired this year because I'd be away for too much of the summer for reasons including an academic camp and band camp. Is this something I should explain in additional info? Yes, that's a great thing. Great. And the way you've explained it is fine. Should I email you about the supplements or during chat tomorrow? Let's chat about it tomorrow, Kenny. Elisha, should something like technical skills be listed in additional info? For instance, I've learned 10 programming languages and development skills, but not sure if I should list them. Yeah, for sure list them. That's a great thing to list in additional info. Leon says, whoops, I guess I just forgot that part from session 1. Okay, so you did listen. All right, Leon, you're on my good side again. No, don't worry. I'm going to be handling the short answers. I've got a lot to say about them. And you've got some good examples in your course guide that I'm going to be going over. So if you're really eager to look, you can read ahead in the course guide, but I'll analyze those on session 5. Okay. One last question? I know we're over 5 minutes, but what do you got? You're welcome. Sorry to yell at you, Leon. All right, let's review the homework. You're welcome. Up level your activities list. Spend like half an hour on this, okay? BBs, epic verbs list, values scan. Do one, or if you want to go to the next level, do all three. Or maybe combine the value scan with that epic verbs list. Make this activities list like awesome. Okay. Next, research, at least research your longest YS. And how do you find the prompts? Edswell, or Google the school name. Okay. Once you've researched it, if you've got time, go ahead and crank out a draft. You might have already have done this or started this, and I'll look at some YS essays live tomorrow in the Q&A. If you haven't already, please do read the YS guide and make sure that this is important. This is probably the most important thing. If you didn't do the BBs last night for their 1 to 3 potential super topics, make sure you do, because tomorrow I'm going to talk to you about through the step-by-step for writing a super essay that's going to work for many different prompts. Okay. Harrison says, it's kind of specific, but do you know if Stanford's 50-word questions are still a thing? Because I didn't see them on the essay website, but they were on Edswell. Yeah, Harrison, up until last year and for the past few years, the Stanford 50-word questions have been a thing. So I'm assuming they're going to be a thing this year. Stanford's got they ask you a ton of stuff. So that's why I'm going through basically the whole application, because I think that writing those essays can help work, and they double with other prompts, including UChicago and other schools. I'll talk more about that on day 4. Okay, that's it. You guys are awesome. Have a productive night. I'm trying to give you an hour of homework a night. Tonight, it might be like an hour and a half, or feel free to do it tomorrow. If you're watching this recorded, please do try to do the homework before you watch the next session. But next session, as I've said, we're going to be getting into, and that's that YS essay, the extracurricular essay. So how do you write an essay that's on an extracurricular activity? You're welcome. Thank y'all. Talk to you in 22.5 hours. Or if you're watching this, if you're binging this whole series, I'll talk to you in like 2 minutes.